Paper 1, Part A, we'll be dealing with Western political thinkers. Because when I'm giving you examples, I need you to understand these thinkers. Only then I can explain to you liberalism, etc. All right. So we'll do thinkers, and wherever it is required, I'll tell you how to connect and interlink it. All right. So today we'll be starting with Western political thoughts. First, because last two lectures were very technical because we were dealing with political theory, meaning of political theory. We were talking about what is political science. Can we consider it to be science or no? Then we dealt with what is normative, what is empirical. Then approaches to study political science, like no, basically the old approaches and the contemporary approaches, what we call as the traditional approaches, as well as the current contemporary approaches. So that was very technical. So now I want you to be a little bit more interested in the subject of political science. So we'll start with Western political thinkers. Plato is a little lengthy, all right, but he is one person that you will really like because he has his own ideas, all right. And you have to understand when we talk about Western political thoughts or thinkers, please understand that you and me may not be able to empathize with their thoughts because of course we belong to very different centuries, all right. And the basic reason why it is called as thoughts is because it is basically the thinking that reflects the particular age when the political thinker was present, all right. So basically his thoughts are something that belong to his time period, to his space, all right, to his age. So his thoughts are the ones which hold truth at that point of time. You and me may not agree with it, but again, like I told you, when you study political theory, it has to be a disinterested, dispassionate look at the stuff. You and me also have to practice the same thing here. All right. Shall we start with political thinkers? All of you are here. Shall I start? Majority of you are here. All right. Okay. In Western political thinkers, the first one you're going to study is Plato. All right. He was born in Athens into an aristocratic family, but not an affluent family. He was an idealist and he was anti democratic as far as concerned because he was really concerned about the factionalism, the favoritism, etc., that was going on. I'll just read through this and I'll explain to you everything. I'm going to give you a background of Plato to understand why he comes up with his own theory or why does he come up with his own philosophy. Okay, he's considered as father of idealism as well as father of political philosophy. All right, now when you talk about Plato, I've already written in the introduction itself, but he belonged to an aristocratic family. It was not affluent, it was not rich, but it was aristocratic. And because of this reason, all right, you will always see that Plato is considered to be an elitist. All right, he considers himself, generally the Greeks, all right, especially Athenians, always considered themselves to be racially superior. Other races were called barbarians. So they were always elitist. This Greek tradition plus Plato being born in an aristocratic family, he always wanted to bring about aristocracy back. Now, what is aristocracy? Nobility. That's the certain concepts that you see in England, UK. Okay, aristocratic families. So Plato belonged to that family. Even if he was not rich, he was born into nobility. All right. So because of that, he was very pro aristocracy. He was very elitist in his approach. So that's the first thing you have to understand about him. He's an idealist. Idealist in the sense I've already told you, like normative concept, ought to be. They're not happy with what is. They're only concerned with what ought to be. Kaisa hona chahiye. So that's the reason why he's called as a father of political philosophy. Because he's not happy with is. He's thinking about what ought to be. All right. That's why he's an idealist. He's an anti-democracy. Now, there is a reason behind him being an anti-democratic. All right. Now, what happened was democracy meant participatory democracy. You, me, everybody could participate. Because see, polisis, Athens was a polis. It was a very small city state. So people, whether they were educated or no, they could participate in it. Anybody could become a leader. All right. And corruption was always there. Favoritism was always there. And because of this reason, he was not happy with democracy. First, because he would have preferred aristocracy because he was also person who belonged to an aristocratic family. And for him, the concept of democracy, especially participatory democracy, wherein people without knowledge, without any political ambitions, or without any political capabilities, were participating in democracy, was something which was not acceptable to Plato. But the most important reason for him being anti democratic was because Socrates was executed by democratic leadership at that point of time. All right. Socrates was executed something around 399 BC. Now, when you talk about Plato, we are talking about before Christ. So his birth is something around 427 to 428 BC. All right. And his death is something around 347 BC. Now you have to understand, in BC we go descending order. So 300, 299, 298 to 0, and then starts Anno Domini 1, 2, 3, 4. So BC is descending order. That's why you can see it's 427, 428 BC to 347 BC. All right. Now, I was telling you why he was anti-democratic, and I told you Socrates, because Socrates was executed. He was very upset about that. But that was again a very myopic view of looking at it. If you look at and if you study history, you'll come to know that Socrates was given an option of going on an exile for 30 years, which he refused. And he wanted to go for a trial. And whatever the trial happened, finally he was executed. Socrates gave up his life because his entire belief, Socrates' entire belief was that whatever state does is always for your good. It is always in the interest of a person. So basically, because of that, he refused going on exile, and he accepted, okay, I'll go by a trial. Whatever happens after the trial, I'll accept it as my life or death sentence, because whatever the state does is always going to be right. So till now, what have you understood? Plato belonged to Athens, okay, belonged to an aristocratic family, was idealist because he's not happy with what is. He's always thinking about what ought to be. And he's an anti-democrat because he himself belongs to a noble family. So of course he'll support that nobility and nobility ruling. Plus, he's not happy with people like you and me not having political knowledge, not having political capabilities, participating in political processes. And because of that, he said incompetent leaders come up, and incompetent leaders having no political knowledge, having no political capabilities, lead to corruption, lead to factionalism, lead to favoritism. Okay. And that's the reason why Greece, especially Athens, was getting rotten. All right. Plus, Democrats had also executed his, what you can say, teacher or professor, Socrates. So he had many reasons to hate democracy. All right. Now, next is father of idealism. Of course, philosophy. All right. So because of that, he is a father of idealism and is considered father of political philosophy. Because again, I told you, because he was not happy with what is, he was more concerned with what ought to be. All right. He would have preferred monarchy, that's aristocratic rule. Okay, rule of philosopher king who will have absolute power. When I come to it, I'll explain to you this point. All right. Now, what are his important concepts that we are going to be studying? Virtue is knowledge. This is Socrates' doctrine. All right. But because Socrates was Plato's teacher, and you will see in the upcoming slides that he had a very huge impact on Plato's philosophy. So, virtue is knowledge is what we are going to be studying, Socrates' concept. Theory of justice is completely Plato's idea. Theory of philosopher king, again, it is his remedial measure against democracy that was prevalent in Athens. Theory of education, the most important theory that we're going to be talking about here. And then theory of communism of family and property. Communism here means common ownership. When we come to the preceding slides, I'll explain to you everything. But this is just a gist of what we are going to be studying under Plato. Okay, now let's come to issues that Athens was facing during Plato's time, which led to his entire political philosophy to come up. And all these theories of justice, theory of philosopher king, theory of education, theory of communism of family and property was justified because there were certain problems that were facing in Athens at that point of time, and he wanted to remedy it. So, what was the problems in Athens during his time? The golden period of Athens was gone. See, Athens at that point of time, okay, was very well known for creativity, artistic pleasures, etc. It was a very open society. All right. So it was one of the most, what you can say, successful polis at that point of time in Greece. All right. Athens was then defeated by Sparta. Peloponnesian War. Okay, it's a huge war which went on for something around 27 years. All right. So Sparta was the one who emerged victorious and it defeated Athens, and because of which the golden period of Athens was gone, according to Plato. Sparta was oligarchic. Oligarchy is rule of few. Okay, it was regimented and militaristic, while Athens was artistic, democratic, but no right to political participation was given to slaves and women. See, Sparta and Athens were very different. Like I told you, Athens, we considered it to be a golden period before the defeat of Athens by hands of Sparta. It was democratic, it was participatory democracy, it was vibrant democracy, it was artistic, it was an open society, there was free exchange of ideas. In contrast was Sparta. Sparta was ruling of the few people, all right? Those people regimented your people and kids were trained in military, all right? So because of this, what happened was all the time, whenever you saw, there was always a difference between Sparta and Athens. And because of defeat of Athens by hands of Sparta, it convinced Plato that, listen, the most important thing that we need to do now is change the Athenian society and make it according to the Sparta society. So that is what he was trying to do. He was trying to bring about legitimization and everything in the life of Athenians. Plato wanted to change it and transform Athens into an ideal state. This is a word you're going to be hearing a lot of times. Okay? Ideal state. Now, whenever you study particular thinker, there are certain words that you need to understand. As and when I come to it, I'll explain to you what it is all about. Now, what are his celebrated works? His celebrated works are the Republic, the Statesman, and the Law. Okay, let's come to the next part. I think I'm having a problem here. One second. Okay, class, till now you've understood the basic point of it. Have you understood why he was anti-democratic? All right. Okay, now let's continue. Okay. Now, Athens, his diagnosis of the problem of Athens, and he proposes remedial measures for the same. See, he is very, what you can say, academic oriented. So the way he looks at it, he is like, look, if you have a particular problem, if you have a particular health issue, you go to a particular doctor, the doctor will diagnose it and give you the remedial measures. The same way, Plato is diagnosing the problems of Athens, that is democratic leadership, and proposes remedial measures. What are the remedial measures? Basically, the theory of justice, the theory of philosopher king, community of wife and property, etc. are his remedial measures. He believed that Athens was in bad shape because of the governing class. That's democracy. I told you, he was anti-democratic. The system of governance is a basic problem in Athens, so it needed to be replaced by a good system. See, now this is where he's remedying it. He says, what is the problem? Problem is system of governance. So he's diagnosed the problem. What is the system of governance? Participatory democracy. So what is he trying to do? He's saying, let's replace the system of governance by a good system. What is that good system? That good system is establishment of a just state, what Plato calls as ideal state. All right. And now we're going to be studying about entire concept, entire philosophy of his to establish a good system, which was based on ideal state. And of course, he's a critic of democracy. I've already told you. Okay. Now, critic of democracy, because this is the words that you have to use when you write an answer. Okay. He calls democracy ruled by ignorant. All right. I told you why ignorant. No political knowledge, neither political capabilities, neither any practical experience in politics, and you're still participating, all right, and making laws. So that's the reason why he was not happy. Plus, you do not belong to an aristocratic family. You're normal people, you're masses, and you're still participating in democracy. And because of this ignorance of political processes, you're making bad decisions. Because of bad decisions, what happens? The entire society is facing problems. So because of that, he calls democracy the rule by ignorant. He's a critic of democracy, like his teacher Socrates, whom he considered to be the wisest man. I have already told you, that the execution of Socrates had a very deep impact on Plato's psychology, because according to him Socrates was the wisest man ever. And and any polity or any democracy which kills such a wise man, all right, is supposed to be ruled by ignorant people. So they do not respect knowledge, they do not respect wise man, they are ignorant, and they're not even willing to change. So because of this he was anti democracy, or he was a critic of democracy. Athens was being ruled by ignorant because of the system of democracy. Anyone could participate in participatory democracy, plus rulers were ignorant and incompetent, which led to factionalism and political instability. So, what was his solution? Solution was simple: radical change and rule of philosopher king. Why radical change? What is, he's not happy with what is the rule of democracy, he's not happy. Participative democracy, he's not happy. So what does he want? He wants a complete overhauling of system of Athens. All right, and then what does he talk about? Radically changing it. So if you have to replace the existing system, you have to propose a different new system. That's exactly what he's proposing: rule of philosopher king, which will lead to an ideal state, which will lead to an ideal state. Okay, let's come to the constitution of ideal state. Like I already told you in the last slide, he was not happy with the current system or ruling system or ruling class in Athens. So because of that, he was not happy. So he said, okay, let's overhaul it. Let's remove this current system and bring a new system. But he's not talking about revolution. He's not talking about violence. All right. He's talking about peacefully changing it. This is where he is different from Karl Marx. Well, Karl Marx says go for a revolution. No, Plato says no revolution. We can do it through an education system. We can do it by changing the system. So he comes up with his remedial measures. So what is his diagnosis? Diagnosis is democracy is bad for Athens. It is ruled by ignorant. They have no tolerance for educated people. They have no tolerance for wise men like Socrates. So what can you do? Remedy is remove the state, bring an ideal state wherein justice will be the principle, where it will be ruled by a philosopher king. But for that, what is the constitution of ideal state? It's both. He's saying we will have to reform everything, because democracy has ruined everything in Athens. Golden period is lost. You have already lost to Sparta. All right, so morale is all time low. Golden period is already over. So what is required? He says, let's bring about a change in the political system as well as in the social system. So see, he's not talking about revolution. He's talking about bringing changes in a peaceful manner. In political system, his solution is change the system of government. How do you change the system of government? Replace democracy with rule of philosopher king. All right. And second, once the rule of philosopher king comes up, it's going to be creation of an ideal state. That is the state which is going to be based on justice and functional specialization. Now just bear with this. I'm going to explain each and everything to you. So what will be the constitution of ideal state? There will be a change in the political system. From democracy, you will come to rule of philosopher king, and basically it will be creation of an ideal state as against the rule by ignorant. That is what he called democracy. So that ideal state is going to be based on justice and functional specialization. So this is the political system. But to change the political system, even their society has to change. Only when society changes will the polity change. So he understands this at that period of time, okay, in BC, that yes, political change will come, but you'll have to change social systems also. All right. So what is the change that he says that should happen in a social system? First, communism of family and property. And second, bring a good, proper education system who will train people to become philosopher kings. So look at it. He's not just diagnosing a problem, he's giving you a remedial measure also. He's telling you what is supposed to be done also. So he's not happy with participatory democracy already prevalent in Athens. So he says instead of democracy and rule of ignorant, let's go for an ideal state which is ruled by philosopher king, who is going to be trained by a proper education system. All right. And Then we'll decide about the system in social systems like communism of family and property, so that even if philosopher king is educated, he has reasons, family and property should not work on him as corrupting influences. So he says, we'll decide about common ownership or communism of family and property for the guardian class. We'll train them in education system. And once he has proper knowledge, he'll become a philosopher king, which will replace your democracy. And what will end up? The end result will be creation of an ideal state. Okay. Now we'll go with each and every detail. All right. What is ideal state? Now, class, whenever you write an answer, all right, you're going to have 10 marks answers, 15 marks answers, 20 marks answers. So the wordings have to be, just add a zero in front. If it's a 10 mark answer, 10 ke samne zero dalo. 100 words where you have to write an answer. 15 mark answer, add a zero, 150 words you have to write an answer. So writing ideal state always is not possible. So you can write it as is, okay, once, and then you can start using it. But it has to be in such a format, ideal state, and then in bracket it, you write is, the abbreviation, and then you can start using the abbreviation in your answer sheet also. It is all right. It is allowed. All right. So now we'll talk about what is Plato's ideal state. Philosophy of ideal state is a virtuous state whose foundation is knowledge. Because he's talking about an educational system, so common sense is going to be talking about knowledge. All right. In ideal state, knowledge becomes the guiding principle. Therefore, it is going to be a just state. Based on the Socrates' concept of virtue is knowledge, and unexamined life is not worth living. Now, class, just pay attention because I'm going to tell you this theory of knowledge, all right, comes from Socrates. It is Socrates' this concept of knowledge that has influenced Plato. So there are going to be two concepts I'm going to be teaching you. They're both related to each other. All right. First is virtue is knowledge. It has to be written as it is. Okay. Not knowledge is virtue. Virtue is knowledge because you're quoting Socrates. Socrates says virtue is knowledge. Okay, so now I'm going to explain his theory of knowledge, Socrates' theory of knowledge, in which we're going to be talking about virtue is knowledge and, in quotations, unexamined life is not worth living. I'll explain to you both. Now we're talking about Socrates here. Now, what do you mean by virtue is knowledge? First, let's come to the concept. What is virtue? Virtue is any good quality, a quality which is desirable, okay, is a virtue. And what is knowledge? Don't understand knowledge from our point of view, what you and me know. All right, let's understand what was knowledge according to Socrates. Now, Socrates is called as a father of philosophy, while Plato is called as a father of idealism and father of political philosophy, while Socrates is only called as a father of philosophy. One of the reasons is because of his entire focus on this concept of knowledge. Now, listen to what Socrates is saying and how he concludes virtue is knowledge. Okay, all of us, okay, whenever we talk about life, we always talk about purpose of life. Understand, even Socrates was a philosopher, because that's why he's called as a father of philosophy. So his focus was always understanding purpose of life. What should be the purpose of life? He himself gives an answer. The purpose of life, according to Socrates, was that everybody should be happy, everybody should have a good life. So purpose of life is, according to Socrates, a good life. So he says, how will you achieve good life? Simple. Good life is one which is based on happiness, which is based on satisfaction. So first, he is a father of philosophy. So Socrates talks about the question, what is the purpose of life? He himself answers and says, listen, the purpose of life is a good life. And that good life, how do you understand good life? Good life is a life wherein there is happiness, there is satisfaction. How will satisfaction come? He says satisfaction will come from the most important concept, excellence. You have to have excellence in something, you have to excel in something, only then it will give you satisfaction, it will give you happiness, and that happiness will make it a good life. I'll repeat again. So what is Socrates talking about? Socrates is talking about purpose of life. He himself answers and says, what is the purpose of life? Purpose of life is living a good life. All right, now what is good life? A life which is based on happiness and satisfaction. So then how do you come to satisfaction? How do you get happiness? He says it will come through excellence. So excellence becomes a virtue. Virtue, something that is desirable, something that is required. All right. So he says excellence is a virtue. But how do you achieve excellence? So then he says excellence comes from knowledge. Excellence comes from knowledge. And because excellence comes from knowledge, what is a virtue? Knowledge is a virtue. So that's why comes the concept that virtue is knowledge. Okay. I'll repeat it again. All right. I know, but I need you to understand this because certain times questions can be asked. First, he asks, because he's a father of he's a father of philosophy. His first question is, what is the purpose of life? He says, purpose of life is living a good life. That good life is going to come how? When you feel happiness, when you feel satisfaction, you will say it's a good life. So then he answers the question that, okay, but how do you achieve happiness? How do you achieve satisfaction? He says, simple. It comes from excellence. Excellence is a virtue. And that virtue of excellence comes from knowledge. Okay, it comes from knowledge. So definitely what is virtue? Knowledge is virtue. But he says knowledge is different from what you and me understand. He says knowledge, all right, is going to be permanent knowledge. It's going to be permanent knowledge. And each one of us, you, me, everybody, all right, has knowledge because it is inherent in us. So how does that knowledge come out? He says through dialectics, through debate with each other, discuss with each other. When you discuss, you will realize what is knowledge, and that knowledge is permanent knowledge. That is a knowledge what everybody should have. All right. And that permanent knowledge which is coming through dialectics is basically debating, logical reasoning, and coming to a conclusion. So once you debate with each other, okay, that knowledge which is proven in the end is the real knowledge. And that knowledge is basically the rock bottom of virtue is knowledge. And that's why he says unexamined life is not worth living. He says because you have to debate with each other, discuss with each other, logically reason with each other. Only when you do all of this, you are examining life. And once you examine life, you will reach true knowledge, which is virtue is knowledge, knowledge which is virtuous, knowledge which is good. All right. So unexamined life is not worth living because if you don't examine it continuously by debate, by way of dialectics, you're not living a true life. You'll never understand the purpose of good life and you'll never be able to achieve your good life. Okay. Class, have you understood this? Have you understood this? Shall I continue? I'll continue or shall I repeat it once more? I'll continue then. All right. Okay. Continue. Okay. Okay. So please understand, whenever a question is asked, virtue is knowledge, you have to use the word virtue is knowledge. All right. Because that is what Socrates says. You cannot change it. So it has to be virtue is knowledge. All right. And unexamined life is not worth living. You have to give this entire example that I told you of purpose of life, good life based on happiness. Happiness comes from your excellence. Excellence comes from knowledge. Knowledge is something that comes from dialectics, that is logical reasoning with each other. And you have to examine your life continuously. Only then when you examine it, its life is good. Then you can achieve good life. That's why virtue is knowledge and unexamined life is not worth living. These two principles, okay, are called as a theory of knowledge, which basically influenced Plato. And Plato comes up with this concept of idea. I'll explain to you that in the next slides. So here what I have explained. The purpose of life is good life, that is happiness. It comes from satisfaction, which is based on excellence, virtue. Excellence comes from knowledge, hence virtue is knowledge. Look at the word I've used, virtue is knowledge. I'm insisting this, I'm talking about it again and again because this is how you're supposed to write it. You cannot change it because you're quoting Socrates. So knowledge is inherent and intrinsic to man. You debate with each other, logically reason with each other and come to true knowledge. So justice is basically the philosophy of an ideal state. Republic itself means concerning justice. Now, I've already told you that his entire important works, I told you three works are very important: the Republic, the Statesman, and the Laws. Laws we'll deal with when I teach you Aristotle. All right. Here we're going to be more focusing on Republic. Republic is his work, his entire work. The book that he has written is called the Republic. All right. So Republic is basically, don't understand Republic in current situation. Republic in Greek means justice. Okay, it means justice. That's why I've written it already means concerning justice. So rule of knowledge, according to Plato, will always prevail. In a political system, the king is a philosopher king because he has knowledge. Okay, so the theory of knowledge, the basic concept of virtue is knowledge, and unexamined life is not worth living. Those two tenets of Socrates influence Plato to believe that, listen, come what may, democracy was ruled by ignorant. So now to replace a system of democracy, you require a rule that is by knowledgeable person. Knowledge has to be the basis of a new state. And because of that, he says, who will be the knowledgeable person be? Philosopher king. See, he's the name itself says philosopher. All right. Because Socrates is his main character in Republic. So he believes that philosopher king is someone who's similar to Socrates, who's very knowledgeable, who's very wise, who's just. So he should be the person who should be ruling an ideal state. Okay, next is methodology. I use this word, dialectical methodology. It means in dialogue form and logical reasoning. The same way, like I told you, what Socrates was saying, that this knowledge is inherent in man. All right, it's already present in man. Okay, and this knowledge comes out when you logically reason with each other. I'll just give you a little bit background about this. Okay, dialecticals can also be related to the concept where Plato speaks about ideas. All right, now what is he talking about? Plato was influenced by a lot of people. In next slides, when we come, I'll be telling you that there is this major quote which is generally asked in UPSC is, whatever is Platonic is Socratic and whatever is Socratic is Platonic. All right? Because there is so much of influence of Plato. I told you the theory of knowledge completely comes from Socrates. For Plato, Socrates was a very revered person. He was a person whom Plato considered to be the wisest man on planet Earth. All right, so you can see how influenced he is by Socrates. Plus the execution of Socrates led to Plato coming up with this entire theory justifying rule of philosopher king and establishing ideal state to replace the system of democracy which was ruled by ignorant. All right, so Socrates has a huge influence on him, but there are other people also who have a huge influence on him. There are people like Pythagoras. Geometry mein padha hoga, Pythagoras theorem. Same Pythagoras also had a huge influence on Plato. All right, and in this concept from Pythagoras comes this concept of souls. Okay, he comes up with this concept of souls from Pythagoras. Souls in detail I'll tell you when I teach you his theory of justice. Just listen to what I'm saying. All right, so what Plato is trying to say is that basically knowledge is already there inherent in man. This is what even Socrates said. How can it be inherent in man? So that is justified by Plato by saying that, listen, Pythagoras also spoke about this concept of immortality of soul, all right, and transmigration. This is what you see even in Bhagavad Gita, all right, that even in Bhagavad Gita it is said that, listen, soul is indestructible. Soul never dies. Body dies. Body is mortal. Soul is immortal. One body dies, soul will take a form of another body. So soul is immortal. Body is mortal. Body may decay. Soul never decays. So this is the same concept which Pythagoras also believed in. All right. So along with Socrates, Pythagoras also has a huge influence on Plato. All right, and from Pythagoras comes his basic concept of philosopher king, his basic concept of the most important concept of immortality and transmigration of souls. Souls concept will relate it with justice also. Okay, so what is he saying? What is this inherent knowledge? So Plato is convinced that, listen, because soul is immortal, All right, because soul is indestructible. Once you die, the soul will go into the kingdom of God. Once the soul goes into the kingdom of God, he'll see whatever is happening in kingdom of God. So he will have what is true knowledge. So this knowledge is going to get imbibed in the particular soul. All right, but then transmigration, soul has to take life again, soul has to take birth again, take new body again. But the soul will always remember whatever it learned in the kingdom of God. This, whatever he learned in the kingdom of God, that knowledge always remains inherent in soul. That soul will always have that inherent knowledge. This intrinsic knowledge will always be a part of your soul. And this knowledge will come out when you start debating, when you start logically reasoning, when you start the process of the methodology of dialectics. This inherent knowledge which was already present in the soul, which was exposed to it in the kingdom of God, will start coming out. And once this knowledge comes out, that is going to be the true knowledge. And a person who has this true knowledge is definitely going to be a philosopher. So you're getting this, what it means? It means the basic concept of Pythagoras of transmigration of souls and immortality of souls, similar to what our Bhagavad Gita speaks about. That soul never dies. Soul will go into the kingdom of God after the body dies. It will learn the truth. That truth will always remain imbibed in the soul. So once it takes a new body form, when you start reasoning, when you start questioning, when you start a dialogue, when you start debate, when you start the process of dialectics, that knowledge will start coming out. And that is a true knowledge. All right. So that's why methodology of Plato is considered to be dialectics in dialogue form, because entire Republic, his book, his work that we're going to be studying, okay, is in dialogue form. And Socrates is the main character in it. All right. Plus, it is about logical reasoning. Logical reasoning, we learned it 2 times in the theory of knowledge. All right, of basically when I was teaching you about Socrates' idea that virtue is knowledge, plus logical reasoning also comes in the concept of souls. That logical reasoning, when you start with it, when you start dialectics, the true knowledge imbibed in the soul is going to come out. And once that comes out, that is true knowledge. All right, so that is the methodology. This methodology of Plato is again taken from Socrates. So what all is taken from Socrates? Theory of knowledge, that is virtue of knowledge, that is virtue is knowledge. All right, an unexamined life is not worth living. Plus the methodology of dialectics, methodology of dialectics. But it's not right to say that whatever is Platonic is Socratic, because Pythagoras also has an influence. This concept of souls, the transmigration of soul, the immortality of soul comes from Pythagoras. The idea of philosopher king, all right, comes from Pythagoras. Then this major concept that he speaks about, okay, about a proper regimented life, how life should be, proper rules, proper ethics to be followed by society, all right, again comes from Pythagoras. So Socrates definitely had an influence on him, but so did Pythagoras. So it's not right to say that whatever is Platonic is Socratic. Socrates has had his own concepts also. Theory of justice is his own. Communism of family and property is his own. All right. So you do tell, whenever this question is asked, tell them yes, theory of knowledge and methodology of Plato comes from Socrates, but Pythagoras also had an influence on him. And because of this, you cannot always say that whatever is Platonic is Socratic, because Plato also had his own, what you can say, ingenious ideas, and those ideas are reflected in his theory of justice, in his communism of family and property. All right, so this is your one question answered. Okay, so this is generally a short note which is asked. Okay, theory of knowledge, I've already told you. Socrates' methodology is dialectical and deductive. Plato's books are in the same form. I told you they are in dialogue format. Okay, Socrates is a chief character of Plato's books. Therefore, it is said whatever is Platonic is Socratic. But I told you it's not true. Pythagoras also had an influence on him. And Plato came up with his own new ideas also of justice and basically of your community of family and property. So it's not right to say Platonic is Socratic, but Socrates definitely had an influence on him. Plato has incorporated basic ideas of Socrates, but has added his innovative touch too. Okay, influenced by Pythagoras, Parmenides, etc. Therefore, not entirely right to say whatever is Platonic is Socratic. Okay, this can be your answer. All right. Next, virtue is knowledge. I've already explained to you the central doctrine of Socrates, that virtue is knowledge. All right. Now, here, what I wanted to concentrate on is here. Knowledge is a source of virtue and implies that ignorance is wise and undesirable. See, why is Plato coming up with this concept of knowledge? Why is he going up and backing this concept of virtuous knowledge of Socrates? Because he wants to give you an antithesis, an opposite view to the ignorant rule of the Democrats that was already happening in Athens. So he's giving you a opposite view, an antithesis of it. So that's why he says knowledge is a source of virtue and implies that ignorance is bad and undesirable. All right. Here you will come across this concept of idea of good. All right. He always speaks about what is an idea of good. What is an idea of good? Idea of good is nothing but something which is based on highest knowledge, which is opposite of ignorance, which is opposite of ignorance. Okay. Now, he related his philosophical ideas with the political state. He wanted to create an ideal state. Okay. So, it is a virtuous state which was based on knowledge. Who has knowledge? Of course, philosopher king has knowledge because he has the term philosopher in his title itself. He states that a state governed on basis of knowledge will be virtuous and one based on ignorance will be filled with vices. That's why that is his defense against democracy. He says, see, democracy is filled with ignorant people. And that's why it is better to have an ideal state which is governed on basis of knowledge. That is the rule of philosopher king. So he's justifying the rule of philosopher king. Since philosopher king has true knowledge, ideal state will be one where either rulers are philosophers or vice versa. That's why this quote is also asked. This is going to be the answer for it. If they ever ask you for a short note, that what Plato said was, until philosophers are rulers or rulers are philosophers, it will not be possible for people to resolve problems of political life. So he's justifying the rule of philosopher king. He's justifying the rule of knowledge. He's justifying a rule which is based on knowledge, which will lead to an ideal state creation, which is an antithesis basically to the current system in Athens. That is rule of ignorant, that is rule of democracy. So, what is the significance of this concept of knowledge? That he realized the relationship between education and good governance. All right. And he established that philosophy. He has established a philosophy that education isn't based on a private enterprise. When I teach you his theory of education, you will see it's state controlled education. It's not private enterprise. He's not left it on the willingness of the parent or the guardian or the child. It is compulsory and state controlled. Now we are going to come to his major concept, the concept of justice. All right. I want you to understand this part first, that state is an individual writ large, generally asked as a short note. All right. It is linked to justice, which is universal. Okay. And is same for individual and state. I've already told you. We are going to be studying his book called The Republic. All right. Republic in Greek means concerning justice. So definitely the central idea is justice. Okay. Now, he's already spoken about what kind of a society he wants. What kind of society he wants? He wants an ideal state which is governed by or ruled by a philosopher king who has absolute powers because he has knowledge. He has real knowledge. All right. But that is for the polity. What about the society? What can you do about society? So for society, he comes up with this concept of justice. He is justifying the concept of justice in society. All right. So what is he saying here? He says justice is universal and is same for individual as well as state. Now, why is it said to be that state is individual writ large? Okay. Writ here means written. Here, writ means written, not Article 32 of your constitution, the writs, mandamus cure, warrant, etc. No, that is very different. Here, you have to understand writ as written. So, state is an individual written large, meaning individual in magnified form becomes a state. When I teach you state, okay, what are the composition of state? State is basically territory, population, all right, government and sovereignty. These are the four components of a normal state. There has to be a territory, there has to be population living in it, Then to govern the population so that there is no lawlessness, you require a government, and that government should have sovereignty, complete power over that territory. Okay, are all the compositions of a state. So definitely state has to have individuals, it has to have population. So even in the before Christ era, he's talking about individuals being a very important component of a state, to such an extent that he states that state is nothing but an individual written large. State is nothing but a magnified individuals coming together. So when you magnify individuals, when you see an individuals together, a state is formed. So he's again stating the same thing that we see in the 15th and 16th century concepts, that basically the component of state is population also. He's spoken about it in a before Christ era. He's linked it to the concept of justice. State is individual writ large simplistically means state is individual written large. State is nothing but an individual in a magnified form. So his very famous quote comes that state does not come out of oak or rock, but in the minds of the people. It was the minds of the people that state came up with. Okay. So because of that, state is what? State is nothing but the individuals, the population living in it. So state will reflect the character of an individual. Let's take the current polity. Okay, let's take the current polity in Athens. What was he saying? It was ruled by ignorant. Because it was ruled by ignorant, what was happening? There was factionalism, there was corruption. Each and every individual was ignorant. Each and every individual was corrupt. What does it that make the state? Corrupt state. It makes the state ruled by ignorance. So it is a corrupt state. Why? Because each and every individual makes a state. Each and every individual is corrupt. The state is going to be corrupt. So he says, so we have to bring about a change here, because individuals reflect the state. Individual in a magnified form becomes a state. If individual is good, okay, if individual is good, if individual follows justice, state will be just. If individual follows justice, state will be just. So how does he come up with individuals becoming just? He comes up with, in every state, he divides human soul into three elements: reason, courage, and appetite. I'll explain to you what it means. In every state, he says, every state, they are made up of individuals. All right. So state is individual in magnified form. All individuals can either have reason dominating, all individuals will have either courage dominating, all individuals will have either appetite dominating. One of the three will be the dominant factor. All right. And when you follow whatever is your dominant soul virtue, they will perform their functions well according to that virtue. The state will be just state. The state will not be ignorant like the Democrats. The state will be a just state. So in every state, we have the three people: one ruled by reason, one ruled by courage, one ruled by appetite. All right. And once they follow their virtue of their soul, okay, it will be a just state. Therefore, ideal state is where ruling class is dominated by reason. Now he's justifying two things. Justifying that the state needs to be just. Okay, so he's going to come up with this concept of justice to tell you how the state is going to be just. Plus, he's also going to justify why rule of philosopher king is required. Why rule of philosopher king is required, and that is done by his theory of justice. Pay attention here. All right, theory of justice. Justice again is nothing but republic. Matlab, republic in Greek meant justice. So now he's giving you a way to order and bring order into the society and justify the rule of philosopher king. All right. So linked to the state is individual writ large. Okay. If this ever question is asked, just theory of justice has to be written in the answer. All right. It is, he makes it equivalent to architecture where proper placement of elements is in adequate position. The central question of republic is right conduct and right morality. Argued that people differed in capacity and there is this myth of metals and earthborn. Rationalized that individual bodies were mixed with different metals: bronze, gold, silver, and bronze. based on the principle of proper stationing, division of labor, non-interference, and functional specialization will lead to justice in a society. All right. So definitely justice here means performing naturally ordained duties according to natural attributes. Now I'll explain to you whatever I've read to you now. Okay. He is trying to, I've told you, justify a just society. He wants to create an ideal state. All right. Because he wants to create an ideal state, he's changing the political system as well as a social system. So this theory of justice is going to justify a social system wherein justice is achieved, which will justify, which will tell you the reason why rule of philosopher king is the best for an ideal state. So remember, I told you his concept of souls, that soul is basically immortal. It transmigrates, inherent knowledge always remains. And that's why through debate and everything, true knowledge is exposed, true knowledge comes out. That entire concept comes here, the soul. Now, please pay attention. You have to know these 3 points, what I'm putting forward. So he divides so the entire society into three virtues who have subsequent souls, and that will decide their class. Again, the concept of state is individual writ large. So individuals make a state. Each and every individual. In some individuals, he says, virtue of wisdom or reason will dominate. Okay, some people will be very wise, and some people inherently will be very rational. They'll be very reasonable. All right. So what is the soul? The soul of such a person is rational. All right. So then if he's already wise, he has reasons, he can use dialectics, reason out, come up with logical reasoning, and come to knowledge. This person has to be the ruling class. He has to be the ruling class. So because a person has wisdom or reason, he is rational in soul, and because of that it justifies his being a ruler, basically philosopher king. All right. Next is, then people in whom wisdom and reason is are going to be very few, and who they are, education system will sort it out. So person in whom the virtue of reason dominates, his soul is rational, belongs to the ruler class. This happens about certain people in whom reason dominates. What about the rest of the population? Then he says, okay, now other part of the population, after leaving the people in whom reason dominates, other left population, in certain people courage will be the virtue. They'll be very courageous, they will have this courage of conviction, and they will be unperturbed in case of adversities. They'll face it because they have courage. This is the virtue. So what is their soul? He says their soul is spirited. They have spirit, they have courage. Okay, they have this virtue of standing still. They're not going to be bogged down by any adversity. So this such people, who where they should be, of course they should be the ones who are guarding us. So he says, let's put them in the soldier class or the warrior class, or as Plato calls them, auxiliary class. All right. So these are the people in whom courage is dominant. That's their inherent quality. They are very courageous. That's why they are spirited. And because they're spirited, they're not going to be afraid of anything. So they say, so Plato says, let's put them in the soldier class. So till now we have seen two classes. He has justified them. All right. What is the first class? One dominated by reason, which is rational soul. Therefore, they belong to the ruling class because they are reasonable people. Second is courage. These people have courage. So they are spirited. In whom will you see the spirit? He says, these people are courageous people. Let's put them in soldier class because they are very strong and they're not afraid. They're not afraid of adversity and they will fight. All right. And they're spirited people. So we'll put them in the soldier class / warrior class or auxiliary class, whatever you want to call it as. Now, people with reason is done. They are put it in the ruler class. People having courage are going to be in the warrior class. Left are people with temperance. Okay. Temperance means something that is can be constrained. Okay. These are the people who have appetite. They want money. They want happiness. They are going to run behind materialistic concepts. All right. So he says it's okay. He's not judging them. He's not judging them. He's saying in certain people, the soul itself is appetitive. That's what he said. No, that soul has inherent qualities. All right. So that quality in certain people is appetitive. They like money. Fine. Because they like money and everything, let's put them in artisan class. So he's respecting that quality. He's respecting the quality of a soul that is appetitive. And he says it's fine. It's not wrong. They're appetitive class. That is the inherent quality of that soul. Let's put it in the artisan class. So I'll repeat again. Theory of justice, we're trying to justify a just society. That is going to be these three classes performing their duties. It will become a just society. Okay. And justifying the rule of philosopher king. How does he justify the rule of philosopher king and just society? He says certain people have reason. They're supposed to be in the ruling class. Certain people have courage, which is a very dominant value or very dominant virtue. Okay. They should be in the soldier class. In certain people, they have appetite, which is okay. That is their inherent value. We should put them in the artisan class. Now, all these three classes, the ruler class, the soldier class, and the artisan class, are supposed to be performing their duties. Are supposed to be performing their duties. Now, what do you mean by duties? Simple. Ruler class will rule, philosopher king. That is their work. Next is the warrior class. Warrior class is to defend. In case of a war, defend. All right. Remember, I told you we lost to Sparta. All right. Athens lost to Sparta. Golden period ended. And that's the reason, also, one of the reasons why he says warrior class, because protecting the territory, okay, or protecting the polis called Athens is also required. Ruling is one, but defense is another important prospect of keeping a state or keeping a polis. So that's why the second one is the people who have dominant quality of courage will become the warrior class. And the third, people who have appetite, will become the third class, that is the artisan class. Out of these two, the ruler class and the defense or the warrior class together, it becomes the guardians. Okay, because one is ruling, another one is defending you, protecting you, security and protection. So ruler class and the warrior class, reason and courage, dominant people, are going to be the guardian classes, and artisan is going to be the next class. All right. But when you hear about guardian class, whenever you read about Plato, please understand he's talking about ruling class, philosopher king, and the warrior class. Together constitute the guardian class. Now, republic in Greek means justice. Okay. Each performs his duties according to his stations without interfering in the task of others. This is a basic concept. Okay, the basic concept, you'll hear the words like non-interference, functional specialization, division of labor, okay, performing one's duty. All of this means the same thing, that what is the duty given to you, only perform that duty. Do not interfere in duties of somebody else. Person in whom reason dominates is going to be the ruling class. Only rule, make laws, rule. People in whom courage dominates are going to be the warrior class. Your work is security and protection. Do not try to rule. That is not your work. For that, there is a ruling class. There is a philosopher king. Whatever duty is given to you, perform it properly. Artisan class, production, trade, etc. Whatever you're doing, do your duty properly. That is the basic concept of what you can say, functional specialization, what you can call it as division of labor. Whatever work has been given to you, do it properly, do it in complete tandem, and second and most important, do not interfere in work of other people. So ruling is going to be done by ruling class. He's justified it because your soul itself has reasons. So rulers is justified why they're going to be ruling. He says courage is dominant in the warrior class. Their work is only protection and security of a polis. Third is a appetite class. You concentrate only on the things of production. All right. Whatever duty has been assigned to you, you have to do that. Only that, no interference. This is called as proper stationing. See, the word I've used here is stations. Proper stationing or non-interference, division of work, or you can call it functional specialization. when each and everybody does their work without interfering in anybody else's business, does their work perfectly, okay, obediently, what will happen? A society will become harmonious and excellence can be achieved. Only through excellence can you get the excellence comes from knowledge, and knowledge is basically what is it? It's basically the virtue. Okay, excellence is also a virtue. So to achieve this, everybody has to do their particular work properly. And once you do that particular work properly, what will happen? The state will be a just state. There will be justice in the society. There will be a justice in the society. All right. So what are the features of this entire theory of justice? Is it's an unconventional theory dealing with duty, not just rights or law. He's talking about duty. No, ruler class has to rule, the warrior class has to defend and protect, artisan class has to take care of the production. All right. So it is dealing with duty, not just with rights and laws. All right. It's related to an entire society. He's not saying, well, only target the philosopher king class, only the people who are ruled by reason. No, he's talking about the people who are ruled by courage also. He's also talking about the people who are ruled by appetite. So he's bringing all of them together. That's why he's talking about the entire society. State is nothing but an individual written large. The concept is justified here. Okay. Principles of justice are universal for welfare of all, results in harmony, and culture creates a bond between individual and state. See, because there is non-interference, there is proper stationing according to your quality. The quality of your soul decides what is your work. If your soul itself is reason, you're going to be ruling. All right. If your soul has something called as courage, you're going to be warrior class. If your soul has appetite, you're definitely going to be the artisan class. So there is justification. He's justified it. He's not saying any class is upper or lower. Of course, the philosopher king class is going to be up, all right, because they're going to be doing the ruling and they're going to be short, smaller in number, like a pyramid. Philosopher king or the ruling class is going to be small, guardian class is going to be little bigger than that, warrior class is going to be little bigger than that, maximum will be appetite class. But he's not classifying them. He's saying, okay, fine, these are your natural capabilities, and because they're your natural capabilities, we're just honing them and utilizing it for creating a just state. Okay. And because of that, I have my quality. I am doing my work properly. I am properly stationed. I have proper work that I like because it is my soul work. I'm happy with it. I'll give my best to it. Excellence is achieved. Knowledge is achieved. And because of that, I'm going to live a good life. So artisan class is happy because they're following their virtue. Warrior class is happy because they're following their virtue. Ruling class is happy because they're following their virtue. So because everybody is following whatever they like, there is no interference. I'm happy with my life, I'm happy with my attributes, I'm doing my work. So because of that, there is harmony, which will result in a just state, which will lead to an ideal state ruled by philosopher king. It stands for functional specialization, proper stationing, division of labor, whatever you want to call it as. Okay. It has influenced Rawls' theory of justice. Rawls' theory of justice, when I teach you justice, we have this in our syllabus. All right, so I'll be teaching you that in detail when I teach you the justice concept. His significance is in the recognition of the fact that those who are knowledgeable should govern. Okay, so see, basically, a lot of people, especially Karl Popper, okay, he's a major critic of Plato. He always believed that, listen, Plato always wanted to become a king himself. He always wanted to become philosopher king himself. And that's the reason why he's come up with this entire theory. Idea of philosopher king comes from Pythagoras. The person he imagines can be the best philosopher king is Socrates, but who has an ambition of becoming that? According to Karl Popper, it is Plato himself. So it is the recognition that those who are knowledgeable should govern. So Plato says, rather than rule of ignorant, okay, that happens in democracy, only the knowledgeable people should govern. So who's knowledgeable person? He's saying philosopher king. So only philosopher kings should govern. This is his basic concept. Class, understood the concept of justice? Class, have you understood the concept of justice? All right. I've been repeating it again and again because I want you to learn. So that once you go back and read, this is already put in your brains, then you do only revise it. So now I'm going to go to theory of education. Akansha, I would love to give you a 5 minutes break, but the problem is we only have 1.5 hours and we have to complete it. All right. So I can't give you a break. Please, only for 1.5 hours. So you will have to pay attention. All right. And theory of education is comparatively simple. Okay. It's not like theory of knowledge and state is individual writ large. Theory of education is simple. Okay. And everything I've written down. So please try to concentrate. I can't give you a break. All right. I'm sorry for that. Okay. Theory of education. I've put down everything in here. All right. Now, what is theory of education? It gives importance to education as a foundation of an ideal state based on the principle of excellence and education. It is covered in the Republic. What are the features of education? Class, you have to understand why education, because he is criticizing democracy, saying it is a rule by basically people who are ignorant, who are not knowledgeable. So that's the reason why he says if I have to replace a system of democracy that is ruled by ignorant, I have to have an antithesis. What is an antithesis? Or society or a polity which is based on knowledge. How is knowledge going to come? Inherent, yes, but I have to hone those skills. I have to hone those skills, and that honing of skills will come through education. It will come through education. And he says education is not voluntary, compulsory education. State will compulsorily make you come to school and educate you. All right. So he gives importance to education as a foundation of an ideal state. It's based on the principle of excellence and education. It's covered in Republic. What are the features? The feature of theory of education is that education becomes the most important feature of state. It's not left in private hands. I told you it is state controlled. All right. Education, according to Plato, should not depend upon the willingness of parents or the guardians. No. He says, I'm not going to leave it upon parents or the guardians because education is so important. If I don't give you education, how will I understand what dominates, whether reason dominates in you, whether courage dominates, or whether your soul is appetitive? How will I come to know that? For that I need to give you education. During education system I'll come to know, okay, in this person reason dominates. During educational process I'll come to know, okay, in this person courage dominates, in this particular person appetite dominates, and then I can put you in a particular class. So for that, education is required. So he says, I am not leaving education in private hands. It has to be completely state controlled. Okay. If it is not state controlled, his concept of justice will not come into being. Then he says, education is not dependent upon the financial capacity of parent or guardians. See, now we are seeing those major problems which happen, private schools, public schools, etc. All right. So he says no financial capability. Forget it. Education is compulsory. It is going to be state controlled, and willingness of a parent or the financial capability of a parent is not a point. It has to be done. All right. It is compulsory, not voluntary. I've already told you this. The nature of state that is basically the ideal state that Plato keeps on talking about is pedagogic. It is one which is related to teaching and education. So the basic focus of a state is imparting education. So the nature of state that Plato talks about is pedagogic. P for Plato, P for pedagogic. Remember it like that. Okay. It is important for imparting social values. All right. The Greek values. It is state controlled, and it is meant for both the sexes. He is very forward. Okay. He speaks about equality of sexes. This concept of equality of sexes comes from Pythagoras. Okay. So he says, irrespective of gender, both are going to get education. So he is allowing women to also participate in the educational process. He combined military education with other aspects of education like philosophy. All right, combined theoretical and applied aspects. It's a complete system focusing on physical, mental, and moral development. I'll tell you now, here I can't go into details of everything. All right. So I'll just suggest that you go and read the history of political thought, Plato to Marx. I've already given that to you in the introductory lecture. Okay. Sushila Ramaswamy and Subrata Mukherjee. You can read how he is divided the entire educational system. It starts from age of 0 and goes till age of 50 almost. All right. I'll only tell you the most important ones about Philosopher King when I teach you Philosopher King. So it is spanning over an entire life, all right, except for a period of 18 to 20, wherein compulsory military education is given to everybody. Remember, in the starting itself, I told you that Plato was not happy with Athens because it was defeated by Sparta. He felt, see, Sparta is better society. And I told you, in Sparta, there was compulsory military education. So that was also imbibed. It's not like Athens did not have it, but the this was influenced from Sparta, that he said, no, compulsory military education has to be given to people. So that will train your warrior class. All right. So basically, he is concentrating on entire system of education, physical, gymnastics, etc., mental through study of mathematics, study of science, astronomy, physics, etc., plus dialectics, logical reasoning, and moral development. Okay, moral development through music, appreciating art, etc. So his education system concentrates on everything. All right, it's physical, mental, as well as moral development. But he has not paid enough attention to the education of appetite class. It wasn't that he was against their education. No, it's required, because I told you, how will you understand the quality of their soul? Only through education. But he did not pay a lot of attention on it because his focus was Philosopher King. Okay, so he did not pay much attention on artisan class because he did not give much importance to it, because his focus was education of Philosopher King and justifying Philosopher King. Now, what are the criticisms of theory of education? Appetite class education was neglected. I told you, he is not saying the appetite class should not get education. He's just neglecting because his focus is on Philosopher King. But he says education to them should be given because you have to understand their soul. And to put them in artisan class, identification of their soul is required. Education is a long process. It starts something at age of 0. From 0 to 18 is going to be your elementary education. 18 to 20 basically is going to be your military training, compulsorily done. Okay, people who are going to be militarily trained are going to enter into your class of warriors. All right, from 20 to 35, the people who get selected are going to be the ones who are going to be trained in geometry, sciences, etc. From 30 to 35, they'll be studying about more about science. All right, so can you see, till 18 everybody will study. 18 to 20 military education, that means guard, that is basically the warrior class will be focused on. Then there will be a screening test, like you have prelims, which is a screening test. There will be a screening test. The people who do not clear the screening test at 20 will enter your warrior class. People who clear the screening test will basically become the elite class. Now, those elite class people will go from age of 20 to 35. They'll be properly trained, okay, in science, in politics, in metaphysics, in logical reasoning. That is how they'll come to know about knowledge, true knowledge. And once that true knowledge comes up, only then at age of 35 they will be prepared, okay, with theoretical knowledge. With theoretical knowledge, somebody I think has switched on their unmuted. Please mute your mic. Savita, please mute your mic. Thank you. Okay, so what I was saying was basically that from age of 20, 20 will be a screening test. Who don't clear will become the warrior class. Who clear will go, and from 20 to 35 will be covering your education for training you to become the Philosopher King. Okay, so you'll study all about ruling, metaphysics, dialectics, etc. Once you study that, from 35 to 50, practical information, practical knowledge also should be there. So he says the people who have completed the education from age of 20 to 35, the selected few, all right, those people will now receive practical training for 15 years. Okay, they will take those positions, probationary positions, so that they understand practical knowledge. Once you become IAS officers, even you are put on probation, no? The same way, that is what exactly what Plato was saying. Knowledge ho gaya till age of 35, knowledge mil gaya. Now practical knowledge is required, so you will be probationers. And at age of 50, finally the education, theory and practical education of Philosopher King will be done. So his education for Philosopher King goes till age of 50. And at age of 50, Philosopher King comes into being because he has theoretical knowledge, he has practical knowledge, and because of that, he is justified to rule. All right. So basically, that's the entire concept of his education. That's why we call it that criticism is that his education is a long process, especially for Philosopher King, starting till age of 50. Okay, and then coming to rule. State controlled education restricts autonomous thinking. Plato was very regimented. Okay, he was influenced by Sparta, so he was very regimented. He decided, listen, certain things are not going to be studied. Only the syllabus that Plato decides, which is required for the moral upliftment of people, only that will be studied. Okay, so he is not giving you autonomy in thinking what you want to think. No, it's going to be regimented. Only these books have to be read. Only such music has to be heard. This regimen has to be followed. This diet has to be followed. It's a very regimented life, and there is no autonomous thinking. Everything is controlled. All right. That's why this is a criticism that the straight control education is going to restrict autonomous thinking because Plato has regimented everything. Syllabus he decides everything. You have to follow it. All right. Now, what is the relevance? First person to recognize significance of education for ruling class. This is self-explanatory. First, to not discriminate between man and woman with regards to education. I told you equality of sexes. This concept is basically coming from Pythagoras. Considered education as the most effective remedy for treatment of a diseased society because he called democracy the rule of ignorant or rule by ignorant. Of course, his remedy was education. So comes up his theory of education. Gave a comprehensive theory of education. Of course, from age of 0, just birth, to age of 50, Philosopher King is learning. Okay, theory as well as practice. So yes, it's a comprehensive theory of education which concentrates on your moral, mental, as well as physical development. Okay, emphasize that imparting education is the most important task of a state. I told you pedagogic, P for Plato, P for pedagogic. Now let's come to a very controversial issue, theory of communism or theory of community. You can call it either or, both of them are right. All right. He talks about community theory of communism or theory of community, meaning common ownership. Communism you're going to study under Marx also, but I'm going to tell you there's a difference between both of them. All right. Now, theory of communism is a very radical concept that he came up with. I'm telling you, I'm warning you in advance, you may not like it. All right, but you have to understand, like when I told you political theory, it has to be a disinterested view of everything, dispassionate view. Understand, it is his thought. We are studying Western political thought of Plato. Thought is something that belongs to a particular age. I told you in the starting itself. So because it belongs to a particular age, you and me may not like it, but we have to look at it from a dispassionate and disinterested manner. All right. He is basically suggesting communism of wife and property, family and property. All right. Now, why? Because he's giving you a justification for that. He diagnosed two problems associated with the condition of Athens. There was corruption, rule of democracy, which was rule of ignorant people. So there was corruption. And because there was rule of ignorant people, they did not respect merit. They were nepotist. Okay, they believed in nepotism. All right, you know, nepotism has been in vague since a very long time. Last 2 years, we have been discussing about nepotism in Bollywood, etc. So that is a concept which was seen even during, or was something that even Plato spoke about. Factionalism, favoritism, etc. All of that was happening in Athens. So he wanted to remedy it. So he believed that family had a greater corrupting influence than property. He said, see, any person, okay, you, me, how much ever reasonable we are, we will always have a emotional bond or an emotional soft corner for our own family members. I will always want to secure my life and secure life of my future generations also to come. So that may make me susceptible to corruption. All right. So he says family can be more corrupting influence than property. Okay. But he says family was required for political, eugenic, and moral purposes. So what does he come up and do? He says, see, there are three classes: the ruling class, the warrior class. Ruling class and warrior class together become the guardian class. Okay. He says guardian class will not have family, guardian class will not have property. All right. Who will have property and family? artisan class, because artisan class does not get to participate in political process. So what are the guardian classes? I'm repeating again: ruler class, the philosopher king, and the warrior class become the guardian class. They will not have family and property. That will be common family and common property. I'll explain to you what it is. But artisan class, the last class, the third class, will have family and property. But it's give and take. It's give and take. Just because guardian class is ruling and defending, Plato says, I'm not going to give them family or property because I don't want any corrupting influences on them. While he says, okay, but artisan class does not get political participation, neither does it get political power. So now that I'm not giving them participation in politics, I'll rather give them the simple pleasures of having family and property. So theory of communism is only for the guardian class, not for the artisan class. That's what I have written here. Artisan class can have property. Artisan class could have property because they are materialistic. All right. Now, what do you mean by it? All right. Class, when you talk about the community of family and property, that is not supposed to be given to the guardian class, the ruler and the warrior class. Basic concept was to avoid favoritism, to avoid communism. So what did he say? Okay. He said that, okay, listen, what do you mean by common ownership here? He says there will be no monogamous marriages for the guardian class. Okay, we'll concentrate on the eugenics. The best people, the dominant people who have reason, they will have sexual unions together so that the progenies are also the ones who have basically the dominant soul of reason. So he's talking about temporary sexual relations or temporary sexual unions, which will be decided by the philosopher king and the guardian class. Okay, they'll not have marriages. The ruling class as well as the warrior class will not have marriages. They'll have temporary sexual unions, which will be decided basically by your guardian class itself. All right, they will not have property. They live in barracks. Okay, they live in barracks. A very little space will be given to them. No private property. That space where they occupy can be theirs, but that's not a private property. So they'll not have private property. So no marriage, no monogamous marriage. They're going to be temporary sexual unions for the guardian class. So no family, no marriage. Any, because of the sexual unions, whatever children are born, those children will be given to the state and they will be brought up by the state. The people who gave birth to them will not know who is their child. The state will bring them up. All right, the state will bring them up through the matter of education, through the nurseries, etc. So temporary sexual unions for the guardian class, the children born out of sexual unions will be given to the state. The parent won't know who is their child, so there is no scope of favoritism. It's a very radical concept. Okay, this concept he gave for two reasons. Because he allowed equality of education to both women and men, he said, why should only women have childbearing responsibilities? No. If that woman has reason dominating, she can become a philosopher queen. Why not? So to improve the position of women, for emancipation of their position, only for guardian class women, he says, forget monogamous marriage, forget the childbearing and child rearing qualities that are always associated with women. No, if the woman has reasons, let her go get into temporary sexual relations so that the progeny is also the one in whom reason dominates. Plus, that will give women more time to concentrate on politics because she has reason dominating. That's the reason why guardian class will not have family, no monogamous marriages, only temporary sexual relations. And no property. Live in barracks, have common house, common ownership of house. Only a particular area that you occupy will be yours. All right. But artisan class can have property. They can have a family. They're materialistic. No, they're appetitive. But they cannot participate in the political processes. So it's give and take. He's not preferring or giving preferential treatment to one class. He is mixing and matching both of them. Okay. So whatever he takes away from the guardian class, he gives the artisan class. And what he takes away from the artisan class, political participation, he gives it to the guardian class. Now, it is a very radical and revolutionary suggestion. It is criticized by liberal and conservative thinkers alike. Aristotle criticized it. Okay, he said it can lead to psychological problems. Aristotle's criticism is very important, all right, because he says that institutions like property and family have functionalist significance. That's why they have been carrying on for such a long point of time. You cannot abolish it in one go. Okay, property also gives you a sense of, what you can say, a concept or sense of security. And when I have security, it can also give rise to this concept that, okay, I have enough, whatever is extra, whatever is surplus, let me give it to the needy people. So that concept of charity also comes from having property. If you're not giving property and family, you're psychologically creating problems for a philosopher king as well as the warrior class. So conclusion can be, diagnosis is correct, yes, that you should avoid corruption, avoid factionalism, avoid nepotism, favoritism, etc. But prescription is very utopian. You cannot bring it into reality. You cannot bring it into reality. Theory of philosopher king. I've put everything here itself. All right. What are the limitations? See, philosopher king is going to have absolute power because he's dominated by reason. All right, he has true knowledge. Plus, education system. He's come through the entire education system, survived the entire educational system. Theory plus practical knowledge, and at the age of 50, he's finally prepared. All right, but he'll have certain limitations. Even if he has absolute power to make rules, what are the limitations? He cannot change the system of education. Okay, he has to maintain functional specializations. The concept of three souls, the concept of justice has to be maintained. Cannot change that, because that is going to be a factory that is going to come up with those three classes, no, to tell you who's going to be in a warrior class, who's going to be in the ruler class, and who's going to be in the artisan class. The duty to maintain the size of a state, because if it keeps on increasing, it becomes problematic. Magad empire, best example for it. The more it grew, it started becoming difficult to control it, and that's why it broke. All right, so size should be maintained. All right, because only philosopher king, one person, how much can he rule? All right, so for that, size needs to be limited so that the ruling, the polity is good. And check the inflow of wealth. Nobody should become very rich, nobody should become extremely poor. There should be a little bit of, what you can say, medium. There should be something called as median. Okay, so that should be something that philosopher king should check. It should not either be very rich and nobody should be extremely poor, because in such situation, whether it is extreme rich or extreme poor, then a society cannot function. There will be problems, there will be conflicts, there will be struggles. What Marx says, conflicts, okay, because they're antithesis. So he says avoid that. So check inflow of wealth, see there is no monopoly of wealth. Justification of philosopher king, reason is that guardian class should dominate, because reason and courage, okay, and that it is always preferable to have a philosopher king because he is just, he is knowledgeable, he has seen knowledge, he knows what is just. So he is not a person who's going to be affected by power, he's not going to be a person who's going to be affected by money. No, because he doesn't have family, doesn't have property, nothing. What is he going to be lusting for? Nothing. So he'll only concentrate on rule. That is his justification. Criticism is, it is an unachievable idea. All right, you cannot have one philosopher king dominating, it becomes totalitarianism. Okay, political wisdom can't be dependent on education alone. See, education can be one, but I may have reason, but it's not necessary that I will have political ambition. I know political science, you are studying political science, but not necessarily tomorrow you want to get into politics, right? The same thing. I may have wisdom. I may be a student who is trained in for 50 years to become philosopher king, but I may not like it. I may not want to rule. That is not taken into consideration. So he's not giving me any autonomy. All right. He's saying, okay, education happens, you're trained, now you become a philosopher king. There can be a possibility of misuse of power. How much of a reason is there, even if you don't give him family and property, you cannot always say that yes, good education will always result in good people. Okay, it cannot be a yardstick. So he says there can be a possibility of misuse of power, and Plato himself wanted to be a philosopher king, so he's justified this entire concept. Okay, Class, I think we'll stop here today. The next concepts, whatever is required, fascism and everything, we'll do it later. We don't want to bombard you. Okay. Till now you've understood? Till now you've understood? Questions? Okay, fine. I'm just checking if you have any questions. Is the Plato topic complete? No, no, no. It's going to be next lecture also, very small part. I'll complete it. Okay. Are the children sex based, like boy or girl, or any preference for the state? Siddesh, no. It was equality of sexes. That concept that Plato believed came from Pythagoras. It was equality of sexes. Okay. So whether it was a boy or a girl, as long as it was coming from temporary sexual relations or temporary sexual unions of the guardian class, they were treated equally. Okay. They were treated equally. Question: Plato was enemy of open society. Siddesh, this question I am going to be dealing with in the next lecture. Okay, I'm going to justify, I'm going to tell you what Karl Popper said and why it happened. So I'll just tell you in the next lecture. If you want me to continue, I can do it today also. But I think all of majority of you are tired. You want me to continue? Then I can teach you today itself. Otherwise, we'll continue it in the next lecture. Want me to continue, but what about the rest of them? I have no issues. I'll continue. Okay, fine. I have no issues. Till the time this logs off, I can continue. All right. So is it okay if I continue for some time? Okay, fine. Okay. Fascism and Plato. There are certain similarities and there are certain differences. You have to learn them. Okay, fascism is Mussolini. I'll be teaching you this because we're going to be dealing with ideology called fascism. So I'm not going into much details because when I teach you fascism, you'll understand it. Now I'm just going to read through this because I have to teach you fascism for you to understand this. Similarities between Plato and fascism are both consider state to be more important than individual. Okay, that's the reason why Plato has been called as anti-individualistic. Okay, they gave more importance to the state. Fascism gave Mussolini gave more importance to Italy. Greece, I'm sorry, Plato is giving more importance to Athens. They go on an assumption that citizens should sacrifice themselves for the wider interest of a state. So, like Philosopher King, I told you, he's trained, so he has to rule. They're not asking him whether you will rule or not rule. All right. Somewhere down the line, Plato says, ki, okay, he should be asked, but Philosopher King, being such a good person, such a just person, himself will sacrifice his own self interest and say, okay, fine, for the state, I'll rule, even if it is not his personal interest. All right. It controls every aspect of life. When I teach you fascism, you'll learn this. Today, I showed you for Plato, education ho, birth ho, family ho, property ho, your profession ho, everything state decides. You don't decide anything. So control of every aspect of life. No faith in democracy. Of course, fascism came against democracy. All right. Rule of a person over law. Mussolini justified his rule. Plato is justifying the rule of philosopher king. Propagation of myths of metal and earthborn, and myths of racial superiority. Plato, to justify these three classes, okay, said that let's go on a false basis of myth of metal and earthborn. That each one of us is born from earth, so we are equal. But some of us are made up of gold, some of us are made up of silver, some of us are made up of copper or bronze. Who's made up of gold? Common sense, rulers. Philosopher King is made up of gold. Who is made up of silver? Warrior class. Who is made up of copper or bronze? Some books call it copper, some books call it bronze. I'm using both. Artisan class. So he says there's nothing of this sort. It is only a myth, a false concept, only to justify the three souls and why the guardian class should dominate over the artisan class, so that artisan class does not revolt. Okay, so it's a myth. I'm writing it here. It's a myth. Okay, and always I told you, Greece also believed in racial superiority. Fascism also believed in racial superiority. Origin and circumstances differ. Okay, fascism is basically a 20th century ideology. Plato's concept, entire theory of political philosophy is in BC. Platonic is systematic, it is based on reason. Okay, fascism is absolutely irrational. and absolutely not systematic. When I teach you fascism, I'll get into the details of it. Plato subordinates politics to ethics. For Plato, ethics, justice, etc. is more important, while fascism subordinates everything for politics. Come to power, remaining in power is more important for him. So he is fascism, and Mussolini especially gives more importance to politics. Plato gives more importance to ethics. Okay. Plato is an enemy of open society. Siddesh, your question comes here. Or the Plato is father of totalitarianism, or most of Plato's interpreters are seduced by his greatness and have taken his political philosophy as a benign project without taking into account its dangerous tendencies towards totalitarianism. Any of these questions ask, same answer. You to start with, Plato is a great political philosopher, and Emerson stated, because it is quoted, that Plato is philosophy and philosophy is Plato. While Whitehead said that the entire Western political philosophy is nothing but footnotes to Plato. So majority have praised his contributions. But then came Karl Popper. And Karl Popper came up with this book called Open Society and Its Enemies. And in that is where he says Plato is an enemy of open society. Because see, Karl Popper's book itself says open society and its enemies. So he is saying that basically all these Emerson, Whitehead, etc., are utilizing, are respecting Plato so much, wherein you just ignore the fact that he is actually creating dangerous totalitarian state. What is totalitarian state? Rule of only philosopher king, followed by guardian class. So whatever I say is right because he's just. All right. So he's creating totalitarian state and he's giving absolute power to the philosopher king. So because of that, he calls him first fascist. I showed you similarities. Okay, no belief in democracy. Everything is more importance to state. So he says he's a first fascist and wanted himself to be a philosopher king. If we, and Popper even goes to the view of saying that if we don't accept that Plato is totalitarian, especially in Republic, then we are under a spell of Plato, and he is an absolute enemy of open society. But Popper is not the only one who criticized Plato. Okay, Berlin also stated that Plato did not give individual the freedom of choice, which is an inalienable human right. I told you, depending upon your souls, that is going to be decided by your education system. You're going to be graded into a particular class. All right. So there is no individual freedom. Even in education system, no autonomous thinking. You have to follow whatever is taught to you. So because of that, there's no freedom of choice. So not just Karl Popper, but even Berlin has criticized him. So you can end up with saying that yes, Popper's criticism holds true, and we won't be able to see Plato in a traditional manner, but we have to agree that he was a creative political philosopher. And Popper himself says nobody can remain indifferent to Plato's political ideas. Comparison of communism of Marx and Plato. Okay, Marxism is basically, both of them are critic of democracy and both support the concept of class. Both support concept of class. Marx is materialistic, economy, everything he talks about is economy. All right, Plato is idealist, what ought to be. So he's not talking about economy, he's not concerned with money, he's concerned with idealism, ideal state, what ought to be, a state which is a just state. Aims at a classless society. That is basically what is communism. Stateless and classless society of Karl Marx is communism. But his communism, Plato's communism is your soul. Okay, he establishes it through three classes in society depending upon the spiritual quality of a soul. And end is to establish an ideal society. So far from making it classless, he's actually creating classes to justify his concept of justice. All right, and to justify the guardian class dominating the artisan class. All right, Marx supports violent methods, revolution, conflict between the bourgeois and the proletariat leads to a classless society and dictatorship of a proletariat is what Marx is talking about. So it is violent. He supports peaceful method, pedagogic, through education. Through education. Class, you will get into this more detail when I teach you Marx. Okay, last, Plato's position in history of Western political thought. He's a father of political philosophy, I've already told you, and father of idealism. I've already told you what Emerson said. So just quote Emerson and Whitehead. Okay. The above statements show his contribution to the field of political philosophy, but he's also important because he gave the theory of idea, okay, and established the study of idea as superior to that of a matter. Therefore, philosophy is superior to physics. Physics is only concentrating on whatever you can see, but his concept of knowledge was based on purpose of life. That's why philosophy concentrates on purpose of life. What Socrates spoke about, virtue is knowledge, okay, comes here. It was Plato who emphasized that we shouldn't just focus on describing the state, but also on understanding the idea of a state and to create a state. Not just theory, practice also is required. That's why he brings about a proper educational system and concept of justice and says once each and every class performs their functions properly without non-interference, an ideal state, a just state can be created. Last, he established that knowledge of philosophy is not just for betterment of a philosopher, but good for society. Why? Rule of philosopher king. He's justifying it. He's saying rule which is based on knowledge, which is coming from dialectics, true knowledge. So the person who has true knowledge, his rule is better, not just for the person, but it is a very good thing for a society also. So finally, what will happen? It will lead to a virtuous life. It will lead to a good life. It will lead to a good, knowledgeable life. Thus, Plato and his contributions have been admired by many political scholars as well as by his critics. So, to conclude, the Western thought, one might say, has either been Platonic or anti-Platonic, but hardly ever non-Platonic. So, like I told you in the last slide also, that Plato's influence can be seen on thoughts. When I teach you other thinkers also, I'll tell you, Aristotle is influenced by Plato. Gandhi, his entire concept of education also is influenced by Plato. So, whether Western thought or Indian thought, it is influenced by Plato. All right. Okay, class, we'll stop here. Anybody has any questions? Siddesh, I hope I've answered your question. Akansha, you will not get it. See, when I teach you Karl Marx, that's the reason why after first topic, I've already started with your Plato, etc. So when I come to Karl Marx, I'll explain this concept of class and aims at classless society. That's entire study of Marx. So I cannot explain to you in a simple concept. So just bear with me. I'll definitely explain to you what it means when I teach you Marx. All right. And I'll explain to you that time you'll understand the Plato concept also. Okay. So just wait for that lecture. When I teach you Karl Marx, you'll understand it. It's very simple, but I cannot explain to you in 2 minutes. All right. So sorry for that. Okay, class. We'll stop here. All right. Next time we'll meet again. Now, homework, please read your approaches to political theory that I've taught you, and from Plato to Marx, Sushila Ramaswamy and Subrata Mukherjee, and plus the slides. I'll share it with Laksh Academy so you can take it from there also. So you can start studying. All right. So please study whatever I have written here in the slides. That can be that those are my notes, but you can also for reference go through history of political thought, Plato to Marx, Sushila Ramaswamy and Subrata Mukherjee. All right, so we'll stop here.